Hi everybody, Azim here. We're taking a look at the 4 different types of tissues. That's epithelium, connective, blanking, epithelium, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. So right now we're going to start with a fun one, nervous tissue. In nervous tissue, there's actually 2 cell types. There are neurons and there are glial cells. For now, we're going to focus on the neurons. This is a smear of neurons on a slide. Right now I'm at scanning, 40x total. I'm going to go a little closer. Here we are at 100x total. This will be good for now. We can see 2 big bright cells here. What I'm pointing at, that is a neuron. You can see its branches. These branches are dendrites and its axon is pointing out and extending to someplace else. All these long lines here, these are axons. They're really, really long. So in short, neurons are very branched, and that makes sense because how their structure relates to their function. By being very branched, they can receive signals and send signals out. The point of the nervous system is to communicate. All these other tiny little dots, these nuclei, these are other cells and they are not neurons. Those are types of glial cells, and we'll get into that later. But these big branched ones are neurons. Moving on to muscle, we'll start with an individual cell that we can see, because typically muscle, just like how we saw those neurons, typically neurons are within tissue. These muscles are also separated from their tissues. So what we're looking at now is smooth muscle that's been macerated or teased. We've separated them apart. Excuse the shaking here. So these are individual smooth muscle fibers. You can see how thin and long they are. Let's get close to one of them. So we're at 100x right now. We are now at 400x total. You can see the nucleus right there and how thin and spindly that smooth muscle fiber is. You can find smooth muscle lining many different organs like your esophagus, your uterus, your stomach. Basically any organ that moves on its own. I'm not talking about skeletal muscle, this is smooth muscle. Skeletal muscle is also long and thin, but it is actually much, much longer than this. So we'll take a look at that later. This is a smooth muscle, it's long and spindly. By being long, it can grab onto 2 different areas, and the whole point of a muscle is to contract. So in other words, inside of it, there are proteins that cross over each other, they slide over each other more accurately, and it causes the muscle to shorten. And when this shortens, it pulls on things. The whole point of muscle is to pull in order to move things. So that's how its structure relates to its function. That's smooth muscle on its own teased. I just want to show you real quick what smooth muscle looks like in a given tissue. So here is smooth muscle found in a uterine wall, so in the uterus. That's 100x. Here is 400x, and I'm just going to point at this region that's going kind of up and down. That would be a longitudinal cut of smooth muscle. You can see more down here. This is longitudinal. Looks very different when it's within tissue. Our next type of cell or tissue type is connective tissue. And here is an example of connective tissue. It's called areolar. Areolar tissue is a loose connective tissue, and what you'll notice is that the nuclei, all those little dots, are kind of spread apart. I know this looks a lot like the neuron stain, but we don't see those large branched cells here. It's just a lot of small nuclei, and those fibers you see, those are protein fibers, things like collagen, elastic fibers, reticular fibers. Going at 100x, here you can see the nuclei more clearly. Those are fibrocytes and the different types of fibers within this connective tissue. The hallmark of connective tissue is something called what we call extracellular matrix. All this stuff outside of the cell is considered extracellular matrix. It helps with connecting or cushioning or transporting. So areolar tissue, you find that deep to many of your membranes, like your cutaneous membrane, your skin, your mucous membranes, so your tracts. Another example of a connective tissue, when we think of connective tissue, this is of a proper it's called connective tissue proper, that areolar one. But we can have solid connective tissue like bones. Bones are a connective tissue. Blood is also a connective tissue. So here's blood at 40x scanning magnification. It just looks like a bunch of dots, because it is. See all those little dark dots every so often? Those are the white blood cells. The ones without dark purple dots, those are the red blood cells. How do I know that? Red blood cells, erythrocytes, don't have any nuclei. Early in development in the bone marrow, they spat them out, they expelled them. By not having a nucleus, red blood cells become round and disc-shaped, so they're flatter. This is at 100x. Here we are at 400x total. By being round and flat, that gives these red blood cells a dimpled shape. You see how it's lighter in the middle and darker towards the edges? It's dimpled. So like imagine a ball, but deflating it on either side, so it's dimple-shaped. By being thin and flat, this makes red blood cells, it allows them to carry more oxygen on their hemoglobin proteins inside of the cell and allows them to transfer them faster. We want to have quick diffusion of gases, both oxygen and carbon dioxide. So that's another good example of a connective tissue. A good example of a epithelial tissue, if I can find it, there it is. Here we have a cross-section of the esophagus and trachea. We know that this one where I'm pointing is the esophagus because it's more collapsed. This is the trachea. The trachea is supported by another type of connective tissue, hyaline cartilage. But they both are lined with epithelial tissue. How do I know what epithelial tissue looks like? One hallmark of epithelial tissue is its cellularity. That means lots of cells are packed together. What we saw in connective tissue is that the nuclei were pretty far apart because the cells were far apart. You had lots of extracellular matrix in between, going to 400x. But with cellularity of epithelial tissue, we can see that there's a lot of nuclei bunched together. And epithelial tissue is always lining something. So there's always an apical side, lining a lumen or a cavity, so this would be the airway, and a basal side, something that's attached to the connective tissue deep to it. Going to the esophagus, similarly, it's a different type of epithelium, but it's still epithelial tissue. Lots of packed cells in this area. These are actually dead flaky cells on top, sorry. Packed cells, so that's the epithelium, and then deep to it is connective tissue. And it's facing a lumen. This is where food passes down.